The number one reason you are failing in learning a language is because you have absolutely no objective and no goal. I am learning Spanish, I'm going to learn French, I'm learning Japanese is not a goal. It's slightly better when you start to say, I'm going to move there to Japan and then I want to learn a language. That's still not a goal. You have to chunk down your language learning into an objective goal, one that you can get out of the theory and then test in the real world. This is the number one problem with your tutors, with the stupid apps. Well, let's be honest. I mean, Duolingo sucks. There's a whole lot of problems with that app specifically. But in general, this is the number one thing that's holding you back. You don't ever check to see in reality if what you have gotten here is going to work. And so we're going to talk today about two intellectuals, one with which I talk about all the time, Kato Lomb, how I learn languages. Every once in a while, people rediscover her stuff and understand that she is one of the greats as far as the polyglots and somebody who I look up to. And then, of course, we're going to talk about Richard Feynman. We'll start off with Richard Feynman, who is obviously one of the world's greatest physicists, somebody who devoted his life to teaching and simplifying concepts, especially complex concepts, into people who had absolutely no idea. We're not going to go in depth. I just simply want you guys to understand how you can apply stuff that he understood in teaching directly to language learning, which, by the way, he is also interested in learning languages and has some stuff on that, but we're not going to get into that today. What we want to talk about is exactly why it was so important for him to take a complex subject and break it down into simple, and how he went about learning, all right? He would go into reading a book with the idea of understanding and having a question already in place, something that he wanted to solve. And because he does that, he comes out with a whole host of information and then comes out with a few answers and understanding, true understanding instead of just pattern recognition. The way that we go about learning languages now is that I tell you you have a subject. Your subject is Spanish, and then I'm just gonna force feed you grammar rules, theories, different vocab, unnecessary vocab, weird sentence structure, all this stuff. And then at the end of it, I'm supposed to say, so Spanish, you got it? No, I don't have it. I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I here? How come I never spoke Spanish in Spanish class in school? Why am I studying this grammar rule? Why are you making me take these multiple choice questions on the test? You're not even testing my learning. It's a show, okay? So flip that around. Flip that around, and now when you go into your language learning, you need to have a question, which is, I want to learn Spanish because, not just because I'm moving there, but because I'm going to be engaged in this every day. Okay, great. Because you're a footballer, you are a soccer player, you are going to be on the field every day. I'm going to need to know how to say this, that, the other, all right? Now, most people are aware that there's some things called business Spanish and some stuff like this, and some people kind of get into it, but the general language learner doesn't yet know how I'm going to accomplish this. Now, they've broken things down, and many people have done. You have lists of restaurants and vocab for work, a vocab for when you're waking up, and we have all these videos and stuff like that. But do you actually set yourself up? Do you have a structure? Do you have a structure for what it is that you are supposed to do when you are learning these keywords, elements, things like that? Probably not, right? So artificial immersion, my method, the method that we teach here at Go Learning Languages, which is one which allows you to immerse yourself in a language all the time without actually having to be in the country, because it is an artificial immersion method, one that has all the tenets of good language learning. So you can check that out right down below, obviously, but I'm going to give you away some of these secrets right here. When you're going to learn something, and we'll take Spanish just as our example, once again, like I said, this footballer, well, he understands that he's going to be on the field talking to people who are going to be using a certain level of vocab. Instead of, at the beginning, bouncing around like a crazy person, trying to figure out and take a few words from here and there, all disconnected, which is not the way that you learn. We all know that context and connections are going to make it easier for you to learn anything. A story pegs, those of you that are familiar with anything like these memory systems that some of the greats have been using in order to remember long words, long stories, long speeches, they are using pegs, things that connect. You can use the same for language learning. If you bottle things down into this little island, and so you have a core circle of competence within that language, and then test yourself on that core circle, you'll notice that that confidence there is going to then allow you to then branch out, because you're going to use this peg here to launch from football and movement now into walking and being out in the street and seeing things. You know a little bit of these. You've seen these from the stories that you've read, and you've done all this, all right? And so you have to understand when you're going into this, especially when you're going into this with your tutors, you need to have a discussion about what in God's name I'm trying to accomplish. Do not let them just throw random grammar at you. Don't just think you're going to be reading random stories and all this stuff. That's not going to work. Now, you cannot jump, obviously, from going from 0 to only then immediately talking about rocket science. You are going to need to build up a base, one that allows you to say, oh, okay, so this is water, this is walk, this is see, this is talk, all of these things. Now, that goes without saying across all languages. We have commonalities throughout all languages. They are more or less the same, and you have to hit these. You have to hit these because they will give you a good foundation. That goes regardless, but once that's there, and while you are continuing to dig through this foundation, while having a cursory look at grammar, all right, you can then build on the things that have very, very big interest to you, all right? One of the other big issues is the ability for everyone to just simply bounce around all the time, from different programs to different plans to different things like this. And it's not that you don't need a lot of exposure in order to understand a language and to then be able to speak a language, but you have to then whittle things down, all right? It's the amount of intensity, it's not the amount of time. People get so confused because they'll put up things like, I studied 15 hours, I watched French news for 30 hours and all this time, and they go and they mark it down. Well, that's not necessarily good. If you can't understand what it is that you're consuming as far as content, you're not really getting that far. If you're not writing, right, producing the things that you are watching, you're only getting half of the point. So how does Feynman tie in to Kato Lomb and what it is? Well, there's this incredible thought exercise, one that's called the autolog, and you can utilize this in a whole number of ways, and there are different variations of this. I'm just going to give you the one that I know to be useful and that I've used in order to learn so many different languages, all right? Feynman tells you to come in with a question, an understanding of what it is that you want to solve. That way that you can then go out and go back when you're writing this down or explain it to someone, be able to explain it to them like they are a 5-year-old. The truth is that within language learning, you just need to be able to communicate what you saw. If there was a dog, he bit somebody, did this, you might just say dog, guy, bite, run, all right? And that might be the best thing that you can do on the first day. And then you're going to refine that. You're going to keep going back to the content. You're going to try and refine that and see, oh, okay, I didn't know how to say he runs away, or the dog is blue and bit the guy, right? You're going to continue to refine that. But if you don't ever do that, which I'm guessing the majority of you have not, let's be real. No one's really doing this. Because there would be no need for me to make this video if there are 500 million people using Duolingo, literally 500 million people. There's 133 million people using that app every month. None of them are engaged in this practice. And so thinking that that's a supplement in order to help you just doesn't make any sense. You have to come in with that question. That question then leads you to be able to understand and put an answer out. That's true learning. Now, Kato Lomb, the autolog, she then tells you, shut that book, now think. Recite what you know. Say what it is that you wanted to do. While going through this in your head or explaining this to someone, generally speaking, doing this alone, right? You're going to find your own gaps. While you find your own gaps, you immediately can then go fill it in, go back, go say this again. Okay, cool. Now shut it again, go and do this again. You will watch. It will be very, very bad for the first 3 to 7 days. If you do it every day, and we're talking about a minimum of an hour, all right? Kato Lomb, by the way, and I talk about this all the time, she said, if you don't have at least 10 hours a week to put into the language, she was just like, screw it, right? I think you can bring that number down, considering that she had to go look through things in a dictionary and do all this other crazy stuff. We can probably bring that number down, but what you get out what you put in, period, all right? And so now that you have a complete understanding that you're gonna go in with a question, go in with an understanding that I'm gonna be able to regurgitate, not just copy, not just memorize, because that's never gonna get you anywhere, which is why I don't like flashcards. We've talked about this a ton. I think people are just trying to memorize things. That's just not how language works, all right? You need to have a good, general, intuitive sense of things. Now, speaking about grammar, because it's something that everyone always talks about, and there's a whole host of, let's say, scholars, linguists, and YouTubers, and couch scholars. I forget the name of that. They're definitely not called couch scholars, but I do think that's a pretty cool term. We should coin that. If it doesn't exist already. I'm a couch scholar. Makes you sound distinguished. Anyway, they believe that you can't get anywhere without grammar, which is true, but the grammar should come in later. So it's not to say that grammar is not important. It definitely is. And there's this famous phrase that says, man lernt Grammatik aus der Sprache, nicht Sprache aus der Grammatik. All right? So you learn grammar out of language, not language out of grammar, essentially, right? It was just to say that you're going to intuitively have an understanding of grammar as you continue to go on. It's not that you shouldn't have a look at grammar, and which is what we teach in our artificial immersion method, is that you definitely need to have some general idea of how they're trying to structure this language. If you know a bunch of languages, you can actually use the fact that you know this language and put it as a peg, like, oh, this language is like this. When you have these things, and it will blow your mind on some of the patterns that your brain will be able to make once you start to know a few languages on how you can say, oh, well, this is like this. So just treat it like that and you immediately have this jump in learning and understanding. That is incredible, all right? And so rather than spending all your time trying to figure out those rules, skip that nonsense, all right? Speak and communicate, because that should be an original goal for you to communicate. Like we said, have an understanding of a situation or yourself or your feelings and be able to communicate those to someone else. That's what's going to allow you to start to have real learning and to internalize it, which is the same thing that you did with your mother tongue, right? Regardless of all the research and all the things that they obviously want to say about the difference between adult brains and kid brains, none of that matters, because the main point about it is that a kid is trying to express. They are living, all they want to do is express what it is that they want, need. It is a matter of life and death for them. You as an adult have already so much baggage that you don't care at the same degree. You're not going to sit there. You have social anxiety also. You're stuttering because you don't know the language. You don't want to look stupid. All right. And all of those things are mainly, from what I can see, preventing you more than your actual brain. All right. Your brain's neuroplasticity, it stops at this age. Once you hit this age, once you hit 18, it's all over. It's all downhill. That's nonsense. So suffice it to say, if you can actually go in with this and remember that we have all this, of course. I should just say this. Now, if any of this sounds interesting to you at all remotely, you can check out our programs, because we do have this, and we have the Intense. The Intense, it's a 45-day language learning course. We do not want everybody. You need to be intense. You need to know, I really actually want to do this. We have people that come in 45 days later, are speaking at a way that it blows their mind, because we keep them structured. You are working with a tutor. You have 3 lessons a week. You are serious. You have work that's outside of this and understanding. We customize this for you, and then you work only and with your tutor from then on to really get it into your head. All right. So if you want to do that, check that out. We have all sorts of other stuff, of course, but suffice it to say, if you guys can get anything out of this, start with a question. Okay. Start with a question and make sure that you can answer the question. Understand the things that you're trying to learn. Stay away from things that keep you out of your target language. It doesn't make any sense. It truly and honestly doesn't. No matter what level you are at, you can start by using contextual clues and sticking in your language. That's it. I feel like this video is probably too long. I constantly feel like I'm screaming, and I'm obviously not screaming at you guys. I'm just screaming at the fact that there are 500 million people using it. Duolingo. Jesus Christ. All right, whatever. See you guys. Like, comment, subscribe.